I do not have an update on my RX-7 or the S14 I bought, but I did buy a Honda Element because I am a glutton for punishment, and yeah. This car was purchased as well, there's a couple different reasons I bought it. Number one, the price was right. And number two, it's 5-speed all-wheel drive. I didn't know it was all-wheel drive until I got there, which was just a big perk. But I knew it had an engine issue. I was told it had a couple burnt valves on cylinder 2. I have done a leak down test and that proved terrible. It did have terrible leak down on cylinder 2. Compression test, same deal, no compression cylinder 2. So I am hopeful it is just a cylinder head, but I have to tear it down to find out. And I've already listed it for sale as it sits. So hopefully in the middle of this project, I'll get a phone call and someone will be like, I'd like to buy that car. Can I drive it on a trailer? And then I'll be like, no, you can't because I already tore it halfway apart and I just don't feel like putting it back together. So here we go. Little K24A4, all stock. The car's in good shape. I don't know what to call it. SUV, crossover, toaster. It's a toaster car. So this toaster in particular is in okay shape. Previous owner was super, super nice and made the transaction really easy. It does have, in the rocker area right here behind the car, it does have a good chunk of rust on both sides. The doors have rust towards the bottom, if you can see. Otherwise, as far as daily drivers go, I freaking love Elements. I think they're awesome cars. Which I need to pull my emotions out of stuff like this because I honestly would love to keep this thing and use it as a daily, but I already have 37 cars on my property, so I can't keep another one. But I would love to sell one and keep an Element down the road or just have one because they are super handy. If you've never owned one, they are not that expensive and they can do a ton for you. Inside, you got your standard like vinyl floors. Everyone says hose them out. Don't hose them out because then water pools up and rusts the floorboard. But this thing's nice. It's got the old stick shift. If you're into Hondas, you remember the EP3 SI, like an 02 SI had the same style shifter up on the dash. It's got like a little head unit deal in there. But what I like about these, open this door, is this cargo space. Look at all that space. When I was living, I think part of the car just fell off when I closed the door. Yeah, for sure. When I was living in the Chicagoland area, I got back into motorcycles momentarily and I needed something to haul my bikes around, and the Honda Element was perfect for it. You could pull a motorcycle right in the back between the front seats and haul it wherever you want to go. That was the reason I bought my first Honda Element, and part of the reason I bought this one as well, just from a cargo space standpoint. There's so much room for activities in here. So a little cleanup inside, drop a new cylinder head on the engine, or maybe drop a whole engine in here, I don't know yet. Again, I am hopeful that it's just a cylinder head. But the purpose of this video is to show people that say, must be nice, that you can do this stuff yourself if you're trying to make some extra money, or you want to just fix up a car and daily drive it. So let's start the tally. I have $1,500, if I can, into this car. $1,500. I should probably write with something better. I guess we'll just put it right here. $1,500. That's what I have into it so far. Wow, man, you stole it so cheap. I can't believe you already listed it for sale for $3 grand as is. Yeah, I mean, I scour Marketplace and Craigslist nonstop for deals, so that's kind of what I do. You're also, I should probably put this, the truck and trailer to go get it is $40,000. Let me just get that here we go. So I only have $41,500 into this car. The good news is the bank owns the truck. Joke's on that. Joke's on me. So step one is going to be getting the crank bolt off and getting the crank pulley off, because that's like the one thing I hate most about doing these Honda engines, because they're always a pain in the dick. So I'm going to pop the crank bolt off, hopefully, but I need a specialty tool to do it. So I have to wait. There should be a watch there. If there was a watch, it would say like 7 a.m. is coming soon. You just got to wait. And then I got to go get that tool from the auto parts store. and then use that tool. Sorry for burping. And for clarity, I really am going to keep up with total investment here so you guys can watch. $1,500 for the car, $100 for fuel and transportation costs when I went to get this thing. Luckily, it was on my way to work, but I still have to air up tires on trailer, make sure that's in shape, maintenance the trailer, get fuel in the truck, make sure the truck is maintained. So $100 towards that in terms of overall cost is a fair assessment of wear and tear on the vehicle that I'm using to pick up this vehicle. So this whole little mini series is going to be, hey, how do I buy a car for a cheap price and then either use it for a while and sell it or just flip it pretty quickly? That's what this is going to be all about. Step one, get the wheel off. That gives you access through this little glory hole is the crank bolt. So you can pop this panel off and you can have access to the harmonic balancer and the crank bolt itself. I should probably also mention, I've never done a cylinder head on a K series. So if you're like, oh, you know what you're doing to flip these. No, I got no clue. I've never ever worked on a K series engine before. So this could go terrible, who knows? So once you get these little clips out of the way, there's a couple of them. 1, 2, and then let me get a better video of that. 1, 2, and there's one below here that taps in. You don't have to take the whole shroud off just to get that out of the way. And now you have access to the balancer, and you can see that inner hex. The tool that I need to go get will actually hold the balancer from there so I can break this 19 loose. These can be a son of a bitch, so map gas or a torch can help there too. A lot of people will hook a breaker bar up to it, try and start the car, and then back it off that way. I am just gonna get the correct tool for the job. While I am waiting for the auto parts store to open, I started on this at like 5 a.m., so obviously they're not open yet. You're gonna take off this cover, you're gonna take off this cover, you're gonna take the coil packs out, and you're gonna have to take accessories and stuff off too, but we'll go one step at a time. There you go, 2 10mm nuts on top of this cover. That pops off. Right here. Next, you have this, just a couple tins. And then this comes off. Say a couple, but it's 4 10mm bolts. These front bolts actually hold the coil packs in underneath the cover, which you'll see in just a second. You can see coil packs. Only 2 have bolts because these 2, again, are held in with these step studs. So set that to the side, don't lose any hardware. Unbolt your 2 coil packs that are still bolted in. Nice and easy, no big deal. Don't lose any bolts. You're gonna unplug all these coil packs as well. Can get tight in there, but pop them off. You can manhandle them. Get them, get them. Ah, I hate connectors. So those are off. And you take your coil packs out. Ooh, it's really hard to do one-handed, but I should probably get a GoPro like helmet mount, like all the extreme sports athletes do. I could wear it in so many different places. Come watch live as Logan drops a dookie in the O'Hare Airport with a helmet cam. Bracket off back yonder. I don't know if your K series has all this stuff, so just use it as a loose instruction. That way that's loose. We can get this harness out, and there's some connectors in the back you gotta get. So at this point, to get to connectors and stuff in the rear of the engine and to have access to exhaust manifold, intake manifold without breaking my back, what I do is I pull my jack stand out and I lower this side all the way to the ground like it was a lifted up truck, and then I'm not dying trying to get to the rear of the cylinder head. Go ahead and disconnect power steering hose, and then I lay it up and over to the side so it doesn't leak everywhere, and then I have easier access to these connectors back here. Let me see if I can get a good shot. So there's a few connectors back here. The other thing there is, if this will focus up, the other thing there is some plastic like zip tie style clips that you see that hold these connectors into place. You can see this one right there where my finger's touching. You got to pop those out and then disconnect all the connectors on the VTEC side. And then you have cam sensor on this side that you got to disconnect. Also make sure to disconnect any accessory hoses that go to the cylinder head. You'll also need to drain fluid, so coolant, oil, all the normal stuff, get out of there. The fuel injector sub harness obviously plugs into each fuel injector, and then you got these little clips. Let me see, I'll pop this back on for you. You have these little clips that ride on the fuel rail. You need to depress this tab away. So I just use a screwdriver when I do it, and I slide a screwdriver in between those two areas, and I push this back, and then the actual fuel injector sub harness will pop off, and you can trace it all the way back to throttle body side and disconnect it so it's free of the cylinder head when you go to remove it. As you're popping this harness off, there's a bolt right here that actually holds this fuel injector sub harness and everything to the intake manifold. So pop that sucker off as well. Guessing that's what they are because that's what fits or works at least, so that's cool. Or is it not working at all? It's not working at all. I got the wrong size socket. It's not a big deal. I'm a professional. Luckily, it's got a screwdriver, end. It could just go and give it the old twisteroo. Now you can pop the throttle cable assembly off if you have the, the right socket. So pop throttle cable off, just set it to the side. And then you have two bolts and two nuts on the throttle body. You have a connector on the back side of the throttle body too. So that sits like that. You can see down here, I don't know, it's probably a terrible eyesight here. Eyesight? It's probably a terrible eyesight. This connector back here also needs to get broke free. And then what I do is I don't want to break the coolant lines loose from the throttle body because it's just more coolant to go everywhere. So I just lay it to the side, and then I'm going to pop the front of the intake manifold off and go from there. Just a bunch of nuts. Nuts, 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 nuts. It's like the Shots song, but with nuts. So somebody has been into this thing before because like the GSR, it has this bracket that bolts it to the engine, and that bolt was already undone. Well, the other thing you got to do on the bottom side of the intake is those two connectors. If I can keep my hand steady. There's two connectors right here and here that need to get disconnected to pull this thing out. The fuel rail sits with two standoffs. You can see there's a nut there and there's a nut and stud there, the stud pulled out of the head. You can relieve the pressure out of the fuel system. I like to just unbolt fuel rail where I can and move it to the side so I don't get fuel everywhere. And then I can disconnect this little holder and just move the fuel line away from the cylinder head and be ready to go on the fuel side. Oh yeah. Oh, feel good. Just kidding. It's coolant, it's draining. Because to pop the intake manifold, you have a coolant crossover down there that runs coolant through the manifold, and you gotta get that unhooked. So now is the dreaded draining coolant time. I like to throw a rag down in my drain pan so it doesn't splash everywhere. I went ahead and pulled the air box out of it so you get a little bit more breathing room. The fuel rail I moved farther over to the side. This side of the engine has a bunch of little trinkets and dingles that you gotta take off. So filming this, and this is the first time I've ever done one of these cylinder heads, is tough, and also making sure that I keep track of all my bolts. So when you get to this side, just be methodic in taking stuff off. Whenever I remove a bolt, I put it back to the boss it came from, or the home it came from rather, so I know that I'm not gonna lose any of them. And then when all this junk is out of the way, you can focus on cooling system. So radiator hose, heater core hoses, pop those off, and then pop this whole assembly off the side of the head so you can free the cylinder head from the cooling system on the car. This is what you will have when you remove this little water neck pipe or water outlet, whatever you'd like to call it. Put that down. You can see there's only 4 bolts, and well, 2 bolts, 2 nuts that hold it in. Get the standoff nut, and this over here, down there, down yonder. You will have to, this main water pipe has a couple brackets. I bent this out of the way, but there's a bolt at the bottom of here that holds this thing in, and then another one up top that holds it in. You'll have to loosen those to get it out of the way to be able to shimmy, shimmy, Cocoa Puff, listen to it loud, light it up, and take a puff, pass it to me. Now this thing off the side of the engine. With all of the bolts and all the nuts loose from the lower intake manifold, that's, I guess you'd consider the upper, you can just slide this thing right off and then throw it in the garbage. Once the intake's off, the next step is exhaust manifold. You do not have to remove the entire exhaust, but you have to unbolt the exhaust from the back of the head. I have already done this. Also, those 2 bolts up top, you see those 2 bosses on the runners, that's for the heat shield. The heat shield on this car is rusted real bad, so when I unbolted it, it basically just fell apart. There is 5 total header bolts. If you look at the exhaust manifold gasket, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that looks like it's in really good reusable shape. So I had to run out and get the Honda / Acura crank holding tool. I had to rent it from AutoZone, part number 27279, if you were wondering. There she is. And now I'm heading to Hardin County Honda here in Elizabethtown to see if they have a head gasket and head bolts in stock so I can make a 2-for-1 trip out of this. They didn't have the stuff I needed in stock. And I barely made it home. I had Chick-fil-A for lunch and dinner last night, so you can probably guess how my diet's going. All right, back in action. So I have the motor mount off the side of the block. I got the intake off. I got the exhaust off. I got all of the cooling system junk off. Before I pop the valve cover and get to the head bolts, the cams and everything in head bolts, I want to use this crank pulley tool and get the crank pulley off of the engine. This is a giant pain in the ass because I don't have the right tools because I shop at Harbor Freight. But I've broken many a breaker bar trying to get Honda balancers off. They make a special socket for it, and Snap-on or Matco or any quality tool company has a breaker bar that will not snap every single time you use it. However, I am balling on a budget, as you can see from the quality of this vehicle. Okay, so you can see this tool sits on the inboard side of this harmonic balancer. There's a big hex, and you got a 19 mil in the center. I'm gonna take some MAP gas, heat the shit out of this thing, and hope to God it breaks free. The last time I did this, it was a very, very big pain in the ass. So hopefully this will go a little smoother. I can't film, heat, and break bolt free, so everybody just take a minute, say a quiet prayer, and I'll be right back. Oh my God. I think I got it broken loose. Let's see. We'll find out in a second here. I need to get a ratchet. Let's see. Okay. All right, I'll be back. It was tough. Okay, so I did get it broken loose. It's such a pain in the ass. But you can see now with the tool out, I can show you better how it works. You see the hex side. Well, the hex side fits inside there. I use a little extension to bridge it against the actual body of the car. So this will hold the crank pulley from moving. And you are going to take, here's an example. This is the pry bar that I used. Harbor Freight, Pittsburgh, shout out. It'll take absolutely all your strength to break that thing loose. I hit it with a little MAP gas ahead of time to get a little heat into it. But honestly, I don't think that helps at all. You just got a heavy weight pull on that bar as much as you can to break it. Now, once you get the crank bolt out, this balancer is not a press-on style. It has a keyway. So save that, do not lose it. Come back here, you see the keyway. Do not lose that keyway as you wiggle. You could probably see, but you're gonna wiggle the actual balancer off. But that keyway is, on the B series at least, I could be completely wrong on K, but on the B series, it is easy to lose. Do not lose it. Slide this joint off. Okay, all right, we're good. Everything's good. Keyway still there, we're good. Next, I'm gonna pop out all of the timing cover bolts on the side, the little 10 mils. You can see they're all around the circumference of that. The outside edge circumference I feel is circle related. That's not a circle. So the outer banks, the outer edge, you get the idea. Timing bolts, timing cover bolts, bolts for timing cover. The timing cover bolts are out. There are 3 that go up into the oil pan. So you'll have to look for those. Now I'm ready to pop the valve cover and continue rolling on getting this cylinder head off this engine. You're gonna have these perimeter bolts that are holding down the valve cover. Underneath those, actually nuts rather, underneath those nuts is a washer and then a rubber like gasket that sits underneath it. So that'll go in each hole. I pop these off before I pull the valve cover because when I pull them with the valve cover, they just fly everywhere and then I can't find them. One more thing on timing cover just before I continue to go on. You have, I'm guessing this is VTEC pressure feeder. It's got something to do with VTech, right? I mean, I'm a technician, I know everything. This has a standoff bolt that looks like this that holds it in. When you remove this out of this port, some oil will start bleeding out, and it's easy to miss, but there is another bolt that sits inside this boss. Like you see this rounded edge? Well, there's a bolt in there that you got to take out. 10mm head, just like the rest of the timing cover bolts. So, timing cover's off, all the bolts. Valve cover obviously is off. Show you something here. You're gonna see some marks. You see those two lines facing each other? And then you see that arrow facing up and that dot facing up. And then down here, see if I can get it. You see that arrow facing that arrow? Well, that means it's a top dead center. Before I pull the cylinder head off, I set it to top dead center. That way when I go back together with the new cylinder head, I already got the bottom end covered. Next step, I'm gonna pop the tensioner, I'm gonna pop the chain, I'm gonna pop the cam cradle off, all these bolts, the reverse of the torque sequence, about a half a turn each, just so it comes off nice and even. Pull the camshafts out, and then get the head bolts out. I mean, there's other valve train rocker arms and stuff that have to come off, but this is at a point where a lot of the nitty gritty and random stuff just takes some time, so you can just watch it on time lapse. I just lied to you. You can't watch it on time lapse because I'm using my phone to look at the torque sequence. So just use your imagination. With the cam caps out and the camshafts out, then you have your rocker arm assembly. So there's two sides, obviously, intake and exhaust. Exhaust side, I'm not worried about. The intake side, when they come apart like this, you can see, like when they run independently of each other, you can see, this is a good example. I have lost a spring and a pin. And you can see there's the spring and there's the pin. It's under preloaded tension. So to avoid that on yours, take a zip tie, tie the rocker arms together so they cannot come apart and pop that out. And once you're done with that, there's a couple bolts, a couple 10mm on the edge of that rocker arm assembly, and then you can locate a little flathead and just start to pry up until this whole assembly is ready to come off together. You made it. You made it all the way to popping the head bolts off. So you can see those 12-point jewels right there, and the same method with the rocker arm bolts, or the cam cradle bolts rather. Take these out in the reverse order of torque sequence, half a turn at a time. That way there's no warpage when you go to pull the head off. Cylinder head is off. Now I have something I need to divulge to you and be honest about. When I bought the car, I was told it had bad exhaust valves. We did a leak down test and it came back and the intake valves sounded like they were making a lot of noise. I did a compression test this morning and it was 0 PSI, but I couldn't hear any pressure in the crankcase. So I was hopeful that when I pulled this head, I would find like a smoking gun, but I was terrified that I'd pull this head and find a giant hole in the piston. So let's take a look at the cylinder head and see what we got. Okay, there's the cylinder head. Hold on, first, look at the cylinders. Dirty, but still good. That's the bad cylinder right there. Grimy, but no hole in the piston. Is that a hole? No, it's just liquid. God in heaven. No piston hole, no piston hole. Come over to the head. This is wild. Okay, so good. Skip cylinder 2. Good. Go. There you go. There it is. Whoo! God, that's a good feeling. So my fears were alleviated. I found a smoking gun. Now this video is 20-something minutes long at this point, I'm sure. Play it backwards, you know, just in reverse, and that's how it goes back together. I have to pick up a cylinder head from a buddy, and I have to get this thing cleaned up, and I have to put it back together and get it ready for episode 2 of this mini series. Putting it back together and selling it, or keeping it. God, if I end up keeping it. That's just not my style though, so I probably won't end up, who knows. Either way, thank you for watching. I'm very sweaty. I'm gonna take a shower, wash my nips, get some rest.